And now I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on transitioning into leadership for an IT manager. I'm going to hand things over to our featured presenter today. He is Executive Leadership Coach and Professional Development Consultant, Mr. Brian Ackles. Brian, you now have the floor.
Thank you very much, Kelly, and thank you everybody for attending this morning. This is a fascinating topic. It's really interesting to talk about and look at leadership, particularly for people who have been working primarily in IT and moving into this leadership position. So a bit of an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. So like any new challenge, moving into a management position, a leadership position, like anything else you do in your career, if it's something new, you're going to be learning and refining some new skills. So we're going to introduce you to some of the key focus areas new managers need to be aware of, and look at some of the challenges and some of the things that you need to do to shift from being a team member to being a leader in the team. So with that, let's jump right in and talk about what modern leadership is all about. We live, as we all know, we're in the industry. We live in chaos. The technology industry in particular is increasingly chaotic. Technology has shorter and shorter life cycles. Global markets, global competition, the ease of delivery of new products and services today is literally at the push of a button. We develop applications, we develop software, we develop services. They can be delivered online easily, seamlessly through the cloud, whatever delivery model works for us. Customers are getting more and more educated, and they're getting more and more demanding. IT used to be the purview of the chosen few in an organization. Well, those chosen few are being diluted, and many more people in the organization are deemed as tech savvy. If you take a typical person coming into the workforce in their early 20s with post-secondary education, regardless of their area of expertise or their area of focus, they already likely have more technical capabilities than many boomers had or even have today in going into the workforce. It's just a change in how technology is so pervasive in our lives. We have multiple generations in the workplace, multiple generations with different needs, different wants, different perspectives. You've got, going from the people who are still in the workforce who were born in the 40s and early 50s. You've got the boomer generation. You've got the millennials. You've got Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z. You've got all of these people, mashing up into organizations, all with different requirements, different needs, different views of the world. And we're in an economic climate which is, to say the least, is extraordinarily unpredictable. It's change which is difficult to forecast on how this is going to affect us moving forward. So all of this to say, modern leadership is dealing with a number of factors which just were not thought of back in the early part of the 20th century when leadership and management was first starting to be really studied and started to put some structure around it. So this is what we're going to talk about a little bit first. So when you're moving into a position, like anything else, you have to understand, what does it mean to be successful in this position? So what do you have to do? What are the goals that you're supposed to meet? So you sit down, you become a leader, you're promoted, you've been working within IT, you've been working as a subject matter expert, you've been recognized for your skills, you've been recognized for your interest in moving into a more supervisory leadership position. So now you need to understand how what you do fits into the overall big picture of the organization. What are your goals? What are the goals for your team? What are the goals for your new group? And how do they link to the goals of the organization? How do you help the organization? What things are you responsible for? And this is a very short list: schedules, budget, staff, delivery of projects, processes that your group may own or be responsible for, different products that your group may be responsible for maintaining, supporting, or developing, or all three, as the case may be. Again, flatter organizations, teams take on multiple roles. So there's a lot of things that you're trying to wrap your head around as you step into this leadership position, notwithstanding the fact that you're coming from a technical environment and you have to broaden your thinking and you have to look at the world with a different view. So this transition can be difficult, and it often is very difficult for people, and it seems to be more difficult for people moving from the technology space into the leadership space, because you've got to start looking at different things. Your value proposition changes. You know, your value as a technology expert is measured on, you know, on the level of expertise that you have, on being able to solve technical challenges. What is the value that you bring as a leader? How do you make that switch? How do you make that mental switch? You need to understand that what you're becoming involved in is something greater than just yourself and your own individual contributions. So you need to change how you measure that contribution to the organization, and it's not your contribution to the organization that really matters anymore. It's the contribution of what your team is bringing to the organization, because ultimately that's who you're there to serve. You're only as successful as your team. And I'm going to say that one more time, and I'm probably going to repeat it 10 or 20 times in the next 40 minutes or so. You're only as successful as your team. So these are just a ton of questions that are going through your head as you're making this transition. So when you're an individual person, you know, individual part of a team, they're easy to answer. You can answer these questions pretty easily. But as a manager, it becomes a little bit more difficult. So you're changing from a subject matter expert, right? So you've got different requirements, different priorities. If you're having lunch with the same people every day, is that appropriate anymore? Are you still sitting with the same 2 or 3 team members that you've always sat with and not sitting with the other members of your team? Are you sitting with your friends? You know, these may seem like trivial things, but at the end of the day, how you are viewed by the entire team is really, really important. You are there to serve the entire team, not just 2 or 3 people whom you happen to know or like better from a friendship perspective than others. So it changes the dynamic that you have within the team. And this is, of course, even more challenging if you're being promoted from within your team and staying in the team. This becomes of much greater importance, that you need to not ignore the people that you've come to know and rely on individually, but to also understand that you have a greater responsibility to everybody in the team. And that may require that you have some frank conversations with some of your closer friends as well. It's a little bit easier if you're being promoted and moving into a new team where you're actually going to be working with people you haven't been maybe directly working with in the past. So what do you do as a leader? Well, you have administrative work, certainly. There's the idea of managing budgets, you're managing resources, and you're working within the environment. You know, and these administrative skills, these are things which are relatively straightforward to learn. Each organization has their own rule book, if you will. They have their own rule book on how budgets are done. They have their own rule book on when they're done, what sort of inputs, how they get the inputs, how the process works, how reports need to be written, who you're sending information to, you know, how you deal with approving time off, how you deal with all the administrative issues around managing the team. So the administration side is, again, these are things that you will learn from the organization, and if they're not offering you this information, it's really up to you to go out and search it out. Don't wait for someone to tell you. Go ask. That's probably my first bit of advice. If you don't know how things are done, go talk to another manager, go talk to another supervisor, and say, how do I do this? Or, who do I talk to find out how I do this? You'll find that people will want to help you understand and will want to help you succeed. And you'll develop relationships with people just by doing that. So that's the administrative side. And you need to look at other leadership pieces as well. And you need to be able to manage your time and manage your priorities and understand that you're making decisions and that your actions have impact. One of the things that all managers go through is this desire to say yes. And it is a desire to say yes to the organization, to say, yes, we can do this. Yes, we'll take this on as a team. It's very, very important, though, that you also understand the need and the desire, or the need to say no. There are some things that you cannot do. There's some work that you just simply cannot accomplish because there's just not enough time. You need to be able to have discussions with the people who are requesting time from you and your team, or requesting you and your team to do certain things. And you need to be able to say, okay, well, we've got this on our plate right now. This is the time frame of what we're doing and how we're doing it. If we add this one thing in that you're asking us to do, this is going to have impacts in the following areas. So, if we're willing as an organization, and again, I'll stress that, as an organization, to accept those delays or those impacts, then certainly you can take things on. Or I'm going to have to say no. We'll have to park this until we've got some more resource availability. But that's a process of learning how to say no, and it's not just no, I'm not going to do it. It's, we have a challenge. Here's a priority issue. We need to discuss this, and then we'll make decisions as a group and as an organization. Part of what helps you deal with all of this mess, really, it's not really a mess, but this sort of myriad of details that you're stepping into, is having a really good and clear management model. And the model helps you clarify what your job is and what it isn't, and what you need to do as a manager. It helps you prioritize your time. A good model helps you empower your staff. You're helping them make more decisions on their own. A good management model encourages people to be engaged and encourages effective communication. It also simplifies control systems and helps you coach and mentor your staff to increase their abilities and increase their confidence in what they're doing. So one of the management models which I talk about a lot when I'm talking about management, and I'm talking about leaders and people moving into leadership positions, was developed by a guy by the name of Dr. Henry Mintzberg. And Mintzberg sort of turned the discussion on management on its ear. He looked at the roles that managers play rather than the functions that managers do. So the functions that managers do things like budgeting. Managers do things like planning. Managers do certain functions within the organization, and that still exists. But more importantly is understanding the role that a manager actually has. So and he developed this 10 management role model by literally sending out his grad students, wandering around recording what managers actually did in various organizations around North America on a given day. Refined this into basically 10 roles that managers play. You're a leader, you're a liaison, figurehead, monitor, disseminator, spokesperson, entrepreneur, etc. And each of these has specific things that you do. So for instance, and I'm not going to go through in detail through all of them, we don't have time today, but for instance, as a leader, you are the spokesperson for the team. You are the figurehead for the team, right? You're the person that is representing the team to the greater organization. As a monitor, you're monitoring the organization. You're monitoring to look for opportunities, to look for information. As an entrepreneur, the role of an entrepreneur, you're looking for new business. You're looking for new ways of doing things. You're looking for better ways of doing things. So each of these roles have specific characteristics around it, and I urge you to look into what Mintzberg talks about. There's also the psychological toolkit, and again, I'm not going to go through this in detail. You'll have the slides, and you can look at this a bit more closely. We'll talk about these 4 buckets in just a minute. But the behavioral approaches, cognitive approaches, the psychodynamic approaches, and the humanistic approaches. So the behavioral approaches. Behavioral approaches means you make clear statements to people regarding what the desirable behaviors you want from them are, and how that is linked to a reward system. So there are always reward systems of some type in every organization. Now, I have a day job, and my day job is actually for a not-for-profit organization. So we don't get bonuses, we can't pass out gift cards, but we still have a reward system, and the reward system is really individual to the manager to talk about and remind people why we exist. I actually work in a public safety organization, so our reward is in having a system and having technology and having this in place so that we are saving people's lives. That's our reward system. The reward system is also as simple as a manager saying thank you for a job well done. It can be as simple as that. It can also go on to much more complex reward systems as well. The cognitive side of this. So management needs to articulate how the goals of the organization link to each individual's performance. And that's also how it links to your performance as a new leader and as a manager moving into this role. So you're providing coaching, and hopefully you're being able to get some coaching as well from other managers in the organization. And it's also looking at the culture of the organization. The psychodynamic aspect of this is considering the emotional impact of decisions that are being made, how change and work affects people. If you're changing things within an organization, change management becomes a real issue that you need to understand and deal with. People respond to change from a very emotional level. And from a humanistic perspective, you're trying to maintain good communication, build trust, build strong relationships, and treat staff with respect. So all of these best practices from a psychological perspective are also really important for you to consider as you're moving into this role as a leader. Now, again, let's focus back on what we're talking about here. We're talking about moving from an IT function where you've been an IT subject matter expert, and again, recognize for your skills, recognize for your desire also to move into management, to take on to a more leadership role. And now you're getting into a lot more human soft skills. And the soft skills part of being a manager and being a leader are extraordinarily important because, again, and I'm going to say it again, you are only as good and you're only going to be as effective as your team performs effectively and as your team performs well. You work through your team. Right? You're there to serve your team and make sure that they've got the tools and make sure that they're in line with what has to be done. So what drives us? What drives people to work? What drives, what motivates us, and what motivates us to be managers, and what motivates your team? So we look for an environment, we look to create an environment that makes people feel good about being there. They want to participate. They want to do the job that they're doing. People want different levels of autonomy, but they want to have the ability not to be told how to do every little thing. Now, one of the traps and challenges for IT people in particular moving into leadership is you have and you bring a significant amount of skill, of technical skill with you as you transition into this new role. However, it is not for you to tell people how to do their job because that becomes micromanaging. You need to learn to let go and you need to learn to trust people so that they can do their jobs effectively. Yes, you may grit your teeth at times and say, I can do this better and faster myself, but you can't do that. And that's a danger for all of us as we take skills and we move into a leadership position. You have to let go, and you have to trust other people to get on with the job. You can provide them coaching, and you can provide them, you can mentor them, and you can coach them, and you can enter into discussions with them, but avoid the trap of telling people how to do their jobs. Keep your systems open as possible. And again, a closed, rigid system, you're turning your staff into factory workers, where they're turning a widget for 8 hours a day, and that's all that they do. We're in a technology space. We're in organizations where we need people to think outside the box. And involve people in setting goals, involve people in the objectives, involve people in setting up projects. Keep your teams involved. Don't make decisions for them. Make decisions in consultation with them. Get their inputs, weigh their areas of expertise. Remember, you have an area of expertise, but so do they. They bring different aspects and different views to the organization. So you're creating, facilitating, you're maintaining your teams. You may be creating a new team, or you may be empowering an existing team and maintaining an existing team. The thing about teams, though, if they're effective, it's as a result of hard work. And so it's as a result of hard work of both you as a manager and a leader, and also by the team. You need to empower the team. You need to make sure that they understand what they're supposed to be doing. You're engaging with them. You're talking to them about the work that needs to be done. You're getting their views and you're getting their opinions. You're motivating the team along the way. Find out what motivates the team. Find out what motivates the different individuals on the team. Some people are motivated by a new piece of technology or a new piece of testing software. Some people are motivated by you coming by their desk or coming by their workplace and saying, this is great, thanks very much. Can you show me what you're doing? This looks really interesting. That level of engagement and that level of interest from you can be a powerful motivator for people as well. You're giving some oversight, you're giving some guidance and leadership. And then the oversight piece is people need to understand how what they are individually doing fits into the greater whole of what you're trying to produce or what the team is trying to do. The team needs to feel needed, right? Everybody in the team needs to understand why they're there, what they're doing, and why it's meaningful to the organization. So you're really spending a lot of time communicating with people. You're spending a lot of time building strong work relationships with people so that you're able to sort of judge the pulse of the team. But again, you're also making sure that you're delegating to people and you're not doing the work yourself. And again, that can be the hardest initial thing to do, to let go of doing all of the work yourself. And I'm not saying that the day you become a leader or a manager, that the day after your promotion, that you stop doing everything that you were doing. There will be a transition period, but try and write down and plan out a transition period where you transition from your old role into the more management and leadership role, and talk to your manager, talk to your boss about it, about how that transition will happen and what support you need from them to make that happen. So let's talk about a model for building a healthy team, and it's a 4-level model, and we'll go through this in a little bit of detail. So level 1 is about the culture of the organization. So if we're talking about teams, it means that the culture of the organization needs to support this idea of a team. It needs to support the teams have a degree of autonomy, independence, and that teams can make decisions and make changes within certain boundaries, of course, because they're not completely independent of the organization, but teams can make decisions within the boundaries defined by the organization. And that's really important, because if you have a team which understands this level of autonomy and independence, then the team will take more ownership of the work that they have to do, because they understand how it fits within the team or within the organization. So how it supports the goals of the organization, how it supports the goals of a project that they're part of delivering. And this benefits the cultural, the makeup of an organization which has this type of culture is really, you'll find it is a relatively flat organization, and authority is more decentralized than hierarchical. This culture level of an effective team, or of building an effective team, also supports the idea of multidisciplinary teams. So you've got teams that are made up of not just people working on one aspect of technology. So your team might involve both hardware, software, applications specialists, transport specialists, right? And all of it is coming together within one greater good, one greater whole. And again, it depends on what the type of work you're doing and how multidisciplinary that team will be. But going back again, we're building a model for a healthy team. So that's culture. So let's look at the level 2, which is the human to human relationships. So look at relationships that exist already, or that the organization really encourages to exist. Now, when you look at this part of it, how does the organization encourage people to work together? Do they encourage groups to share information? Is it part of the culture of the organization that people get reports on what other groups are doing, so that there's an understanding about how the organization is actually functioning? So you're trying to make sure that people have information and they understand how the organization works and how relationships are developed. I just come off a rather long program of work. It took about 4 years from beginning to end. And during that 4 years, I went into an organization new and had to develop relationships with every aspect of the organization. And it's a relatively complex organization in public safety that I work in. And it takes a lot of time to build those, took a lot of time to build those relationships, certainly. But the more time I spent building the relationships, particularly with some of the key functions, the more benefits it had as we moved through this pretty major program of work. So investing the time to build those relationships, both for yourself and encouraging your team to build those relationships, has huge payoffs and huge benefits. Now, as I've stayed within the organization and I've transitioned into an executive leadership role, those relationships that I built during this program phase are paying massive dividends as I move, as I work with the organization and I work with strategy and I work with, other parts of the executive to determine, how the organization is moving forward. Because I already know how people think, I already have an idea of what drives them to do with the things that they're doing. So it all has benefits if you take the time. So you're looking for, the invisible contract of how you want people to be treated. And generally it comes down to you treat people with respect. You value their beliefs, you value their support, and you value their ability to collaborate with you. So the next level of building an effective team is certainly communication. And while this says it's the invisible fabric, communication is the underpinning of any successful team. If teams communicate well, then teams will function as a team very, very well. If teams do not communicate well, then the team will not be effective really at all, because no one will know what's going on. There is a basic truth about communications in organizations. The more effective you are at communicating in an organization, the more successful the organization is. The more inefficient that you are at communicating, the more likely that the organization is facing significant challenges and significant problems. And from a project management perspective, from a project delivery perspective, which of course your teams will be part of project delivery at some point, the single greatest cause of project failure is poor communications. And this has been studied time and time again. This is not something that we're making up. Communications is the foundation of strong culture, strong teams, and it is literally the glue that holds everything together within an organization and within a team. And level 4 of building a highly effective team is the idea of how the team is used to build goals and objectives. So organizations work from defining the overall strategy. What are we trying to strategically, achieve? What are our strategic goals over a certain time period? So we're working on a strategic plan right now for my organization, which is looking 5 to 7 years in the future. We've just come off a strategic plan, and we're just at the final stages of our last strategy plan, which was going to be sort of 8 years, and turned out that it basically we accomplished everything in 6, which is why we're into another planning process. But that planning process creates an overall sort of, I'll say, organizational roadmap. Now, we're involving all parts of the organization, and we're taking information from all parts of the organization to build that strategic roadmap. So you as a leader and a manager in a team, you're going to be, to build a highly effective team, you're going to be using your team's inputs and gathering your team's inputs and representing that to the organization to build this overall strategy. This overall strategy then leads to certain goals and objectives, and the goals and objectives are usually much shorter term. They're annual, they're quarterly, whatever time frame your organization works on. But these goals and objectives are then worked on between you and your team. Your team creates these with you, and there's a direct link between those goals and objectives and the strategy of the organization. So the culture of the organization needs to support this. It needs to support, again, this communication and this trust that people will want to work to create goals and objectives, and that they will work to achieve those goals and objectives. Great teams have high ideals and high expectations for their own members. And the reason they have high ideals and expectations for their own members is they've been involved in creating the goals and objectives. So if they're part of the decision-making process and their inputs have been heard, they're going to feel ownership, and they're going to feel accountable for making all of this work. So again, it comes back to relationships. Good relationships build a team. Without good relationships, you really don't have a team. The thing is about relationships and team and the workplace, people do not need to be friends. But what they do need to have is respect for each other and a healthy relationship with people at work. And again, they're going to share part of their lives. That's natural. They're in the lunch. They're having lunch together. They're talking. Not everybody is talking about work, 8 hours a day while they're in the office. They're talking about their lives. We're human beings. We have other things that drive us. But it's building the relationships, and it's building an understanding about who people are. And it's developing and maintaining those relationships, because the relationships really make the team. And again, we talk about communication. Your job as a leader is facilitating communication within and amongst the team, and also building a framework which is setting standards for professional behavior. How do you want people to work? How do you want people to communicate? How do you want people to deal with conflict and disagreements? I've seen and worked with managers who encourage disagreement, who encourage vehement, almost to the point of violent disagreement, because they feel that level of antagonistic behavior is good for the team. I experienced this relatively early on in my professional career, and I was absolutely appalled. But in talking to this manager, he was absolutely convinced that this was a way to move forward. And he was absolutely wrong. The team hated him. The team did not function well. The team did everything they could to go around this guy. Instead of working to get things done, they spent their time working to avoid him. He created a completely and utterly disengaged team of people. So encourage people to deal with disagreements professionally. If I have a disagreement with somebody, I'm going to say, I disagree with what I disagree with you. I don't think that this is the right way to go. Here's why I don't think it's the right way to. Here's why I don't think it's the right thing to do or the right way to proceed. And I will have that discussion with them. Now they may they may try and escalate, and I've had team members on my teams who who are so stubborn that they don't want to talk about anything except their own point of view. That being said, you de-escalate the situation. If you need to, you walk away, but set standards to say we need to be able to have open and honest conversations about why things should be done one way or the other. What are the benefits? What are the pros and cons of doing it this way? What are the benefits, pros, and cons of doing it the other way? Establish those types of rules within your team. And, it's important that you, sort of walk the talk as well. Your team is there to deliver results, right? They're there to deliver success for your team's customers. They're there to do it efficiently, and they're there to do it with high quality. So you're there to support your team by effectively delegating, making sure they've got the information they need, and empowering them to do their jobs. So again, we come back to modern day teams, right? 21st century leadership. It's about extensive collaboration, self-organizing teams, fluid teams, and again, we're dealing with this chaotic environment we mentioned right at the beginning of this webinar. Things are changing very quickly, and if things are changing very quickly in the environment, our teams need to adapt to that as well, and it may be that our teams are also changing very quickly. If teams are self-organizing, they will spontaneously adapt to the changes in the environment. If they've been appropriately empowered, and if they're trusted to get the work done, then they will be able to roll with the punches, so to speak. They'll understand the changes in the environment. Now, your job here as a leader and as a manager is to make sure that what they're adapting to still fits within the guidelines of what the expectations are. So you're building conditions for self-organization. You're building conditions to empower people, and you're also building conditions to encourage leadership at all levels within your team. You will find that people will stand up and take leadership for certain issues or certain areas of the work that your team is doing, and encourage that, encourage people to do that, because we also need to train leaders for tomorrow. A huge part of my job right now is to look at succession planning, and not just for myself, but look for succession planning for my management team. I've got people who are going to be moving on within the next sort of 3 to 5 years, and I can't wait 3 to 5 years to replace them. I've got to start thinking about it now. Who in the organization do we want to encourage to step up to this in a reasonable time frame? So create conditions for people to self-organize. You authorize it first and then let them get on with the work. Build autonomous and self-organizing teams. And again, you bring teams with diverse sets of experience to the table. You encourage them and you coach them on how to be self-organizing. You teach them on how to collaborate amongst themselves. Self-organizing teams that have the authority to work also have to understand the boundaries within which they have to work, and that comes from your coaching and your mentoring. And you can also, get help from other managers, get help in mentoring and coaching from others in the organizations that are running autonomous and self-organizing teams. And again, you as a manager and you as a leader, you're only as successful as your team is successful. So if you are having challenges in helping them do the things that they need to do, you need to look for help for yourself to find out how to help them. So it becomes an issue where you're looking for support from others in your organization as well. Cross-functional teams, and again, cross-functional teams leverage this multidisciplinary aspect of teams that we're getting into more and more. So good cross-functional teams have a really good ability to recognize different viewpoints within the team as well. Because if you're bringing in cross-functional teams, different aspects of different functions bring a different view of the world. Hardware development, for instance, brings a different view of the world than software development or application development. But they will respect that, and they will have a good dialogue, and they'll have a good understanding about how this will work as they move forward. So you're encouraging your team to take responsibility and control, and again, take authority over their own work. I can't stress enough and say enough about delegation and empowerment. It is the single greatest tool that you have in your toolbox as a manager and as a leader. You move into this position and you let go of your technical, you almost say you let go of your technical expertise, but you let go of your technical contribution on a day-to-day basis. And in order to do that, you have to empower and delegate people to get the work done. And delegating is not telling somebody exactly how to do something and exactly when you want to have it done. Delegation and empowerment go hand in hand. So empowering people to do the job is explaining and having, or not explaining the work to them, but having a discussion with them about the job that has to be done, about the tasks that have to be done. Asking them, and I'll repeat that, asking them how they see that task being done. How long do they think it's going to take? What things do they need? What tools do they need? What support do they need? Who do they need to work with to be successful? When do they think they can have it done by? And you say, okay, if they come back to you and say, reasonably, I think I can have this done, within a week. Well, again, so from your mind, and if you're the technical expert and you know that this is going to take a month or longer, right, that's raising alarm bells, because although you're trying to empower them, they're not quite getting the work that has to be done. So again, enter into further discussions with them about the complexities of the work, etc., and try and coach them and to refine their time model to something which is a bit more realistic. And again, you're trying to set your teams up for success, and you're trying to set the individuals in your teams up for success as well. Don't let somebody promise you to deliver something in a week that you know darn well is going to take longer than that, because they're either one, they're going to deliver you a shoddy product, or they're going to burn themselves out trying. And you're going to, great, you might get something in a week, but they're going to be so exhausted that the following week they're going to be worth nothing. So again, reasonable expectations, empowerment, coaching, and mentoring. Delegation, delegation, delegation. And again, we've talked about this before. As a new manager, it can be rather difficult to delegate. And some managers never end up managing more than 2, 3, 4, 5 staff because they don't want to let go. They don't want to let go of their own expertise. If you don't delegate, though, you are robbing your staff. You are robbing them from the opportunity to grow, and you're robbing them of the opportunity to develop their own skills and develop, their own expertise as they move forward, so that they can, in turn, move forward in their career. So delegating is about the bigger picture. Delegating and empowering is about challenging staff to take responsibility, challenging them to stretch their skill set, learn new things, make mistakes, coach and mentor their own colleagues. All of this is essential to decentralize authority, create autonomous teams, self-directed teams that take leadership into their own hands. So we're building people. Well, we're not building them literally, because that would be illegal, but we're building people's capabilities. So we're creating a challenging work environment. We're supporting open communications. We're supporting people to build relationships within the team and outside the team. And we're supporting and strengthening the organizational culture by doing all of this. So the delegation process is pretty straightforward. Prepare and research what has to be done, clarify what the task is supposed to be, plan the delegation, talk to your staff, empower them to take action, and provide ongoing support and oversight. Don't just dump and run. I see this time and time again with new managers. They delegate, they empower, and they go on and do something else. Remember to plan some time to provide some oversight and guidance, and that's either regular touch-base sessions or support sessions, just to review the work. But again, avoid the micromanagement trap. So, how do you deal with all of this when you're trying to build a team? How do you get the right people? So, you want to get people that fit within the organization. That's really important. Now, they have to fit within the organization, and they also have to be able to do the work. And this can be a bit of a challenge, particularly when you're hiring technology people. So it's a balancing act. What do you need them to do? So for my teams, I'm hiring first and foremost for fit and with enough technical capability within the different teams that I'm working with to make sure that they can do the job, and we can train them to build that expertise as needs be. And that's simply because of the dynamics of the culture of our organization. The cultural fit is far more important to us and far more important to their long-term effectiveness than their initial high technical skill. That may be different for your teams. So attract the right people, understand your organization, understand the type of people that you need to get. And sometimes, use the vetting period that you've got with people, the sort of 3 months transition period when they come in, and look hard at people's performance and look hard at how well they're working within the organization in that first 3 months to see if they're a good fit and if they're going to be able to add to both their own skills and also add to the good of the organization. It is really, really important that you also make a decision on this piece. If people are not working out, move them on. Now, there's different ways of moving them on. There may be that they're good at what they do, but they don't fit within your organization, but they would fit well in another part of the organization. Then that doesn't mean dumping your trash on somebody else. That there's a real value that they could bring to another part of the organization. It may be that they just don't fit in the organization at all, and some companies are now offering financial incentives for people to actually leave. To say this isn't going to work out, we're going to pay you a month's salary. Thank you so much for your time, and best of luck. But this just isn't working out. And you've got this 3 or 6 month grace period depending on where you're working and what your contracts are like. So again, think about attracting the right people and monitoring that during that sort of the first part of their engagement with you. And last, we'll talk about disruptive behavior. And I'll keep this very brief. Sometimes you get people who are really, really technically excellent, but they just can't work well with others. And we've all faced it. We've all dealt with people like that. Okay, sometimes you can put these people in a corner because you really need their level of soul contribution and just make it so that they don't have to work well with others. If, however, they do need to work within a team, then they're going to have to learn how to work well with others. You may have disruptive behavior. People are not meeting their expectations or their goals, or they're not meeting what they have committed to doing. And again, if this is consistent behavior, that becomes very disruptive for the team, because if they're not meeting what they've committed to do, then they're also letting part of the team down as well. Or people have difficulty dealing with different stakeholders. They can't get along with finance. They can't get along with their customer representatives. They can't get along with operations. It's very important to understand this and deal with this when it's happening. Don't wait for it to fix itself. And there's a whole long, multi-day discussion we can have on performance management. One thing as a new leader and a new manager, though, is it's really important that you recognize this and you deal with it. Get support from HR, get support from other managers if you're uncomfortable in doing this. And you will be uncomfortable doing it in the first times you have to deal with disruptive behavior, because again, this is the soft skills that you're dealing with as you're moving into this from an IT specialty. So let's sum all this up. Being a great manager, being a great leader takes hard work and a willingness to learn new skills and put them in practice. Coming from the IT side, you're moving into a position of management and leadership. You're used to learning new skills and you're used to putting them in practice. So this is just another aspect of that. However, these are soft skills and these are human skills. And that's where the challenge comes in. You're always, always, always looking for ways to make your teams achieve greater and greater things. That is your job. Your job is to make your team successful. You are only as good as your team. Never ever forget that, and never accept thanks on behalf of your team by saying thank you. If your team is being given an accolade, you don't say thank you from yourself. You say, I would like to say on behalf of the team that they have done an absolutely phenomenal job, and we appreciate your recognition on this, right? Because it's you and the team together that are achieving these things. And with that, I will close and say thank you very much, and I hope to be able to talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much, Brian. And if anyone has any questions for Brian at this time, please feel free to type those into the questions menu option and we will get those addressed before we log off today. Wanted to remind you all that this session is being recorded and you will all receive a link later today to review the session recording, as well as a PDF of the PowerPoint slide deck as well for you to take notes or anything like that. Also want to encourage everyone to reach out to their local New Horizons for further information on these types of courses. If you are not familiar with your local New Horizons, you can log on to newhorizons.com and do a zip code search to find the center nearest you. There you will also find information on our Center for Leadership and Development. All of those courses and available offerings and schedules, as well as pricing, are on our website. All right, Brian, it looks like we have a question. What if the team that you gain doesn't get along?
Well, that's not uncommon, unfortunately. And if the team doesn't get along, it's really trying to find out why. As a new manager, you're going in and you're going to get to know people, and you're going to have to get to know them individually. And really, it takes time to interview each. I won't say interview, but have a meeting with each person individually. Talk to them about what they're doing, about their career aspirations, about what makes them tick. And after you meet with everybody individually, you will probably gain a better perspective as to what the dynamic within the team is. People will generally open up to you if you're not just talking about their job function. You talk about, what they're interested in, what their desires are, how things are going within the team. They'll start to tell you about, different things that are going on. Once you have the information about where there might be problems or challenges within the team, you might want to shake the team up a little bit and move people into different responsibilities. It may be that you may need to move people out of the team and move other people into the team if you've got that opportunity within the organization to move team members around. Otherwise, it's just a matter of really taking your team aside, as a team, and saying, listen, we've got to learn to get along. We've got to learn to work well together. What are the challenges? What do you see as the challenges? And try and have those sort of frank and open discussions. It can be hard for people to open up in a team, and they particularly IT professionals, they'll say, no, we're all good. But they'll go back to the same way of working. So you need to encourage people to talk, to communicate, to share information. And it may need that you may need to force them to share information on a more formal basis until it becomes informal.
All right, we just had another one come through. Let's see. Dealing with other intra-department managers can be just as difficult. How do you recommend dealing with other managers that overstep their boundaries and try to make your team look bad and attempt to make their teams look better?
Yeah, that's human nature again, unfortunately. So you're dealing with people, and people come in all shapes and sizes. If one manager in an organization is going out of their way to put your team down and make your team look bad, I would have a very frank and open conversation with that person to say, listen, what's the problem here? Is there a particular issue that you have with the work outputs and the performance of my team? If there is, please let me know, and we can enter into a dialogue, enter into a discussion about where we address those challenges. We need and stress to that manager that we as an organization need to work together. We're not in competition. We need to work towards the greater good of the organization. I always encourage people to take the high road. It's you're looking at this from the say, okay, so someone's trying to put my team down. What do I do? Well, you take the high road. Take the high road and say, my team is supporting the organizational goals and objectives. Is there something specific you need me to that we have a challenge with here? Let me know. We'll work on it. Otherwise, I expect your cooperation, and I expect our teams to work well together.
All right, that was a great answer. I was even taking notes there myself. All right, it looks like that will wrap up our questions for today and today's presentation. Thank you so much, Brian. We really appreciate you joining us on behalf of New Horizons.
My absolute pleasure.
And thanks everyone for joining us today. I hope you'll join us for future webinars. You can visit our website at newhorizons.com. Click on the webinars link there to sign up for any upcoming sessions or view past webinar recordings in our archive library. Thanks so much, everyone. That will end today's session. Have a great day.